Those vehicles are on association property, and every one of them is getting hooked and hauled tonight, holidays or not. That was Sloan Adler, president of the Pine Watch Ridge Homeowners Association. Standing in 8 inches of fresh snow on Christmas Eve, reading the words off a clipboard like she had rehearsed them in the mirror. The lot she was pointing at held 40 cars belonging to the families who had come up the mountain to spend the holiday at the little Methodist church at the bottom of my road. My name is Hank Mercer. I am 63 years old. I spent 31 years as a civil engineer and county road surveyor before I retired. And that lot she called association property had belonged to me, by recorded deed, for longer than her subdivision had existed. What she did not know, standing there in her white wool coat, with the snow melting on her shoulders, was that I had personally walked and filed the survey that set every boundary line on that mountain. I knew where her authority ended better than she knew where it began. I had the deed in a manila folder in my kitchen drawer, and I had the recorded plat with my own initials in the margin. She had a clipboard and a tow company on retainer. So, let me ask you something before I tell you the rest. If you watched 40 cars get dragged out of a church lot on Christmas Eve, every one of them belonging to a family who came to sing carols, and you were the only person on that mountain who could prove the lot was never hers to touch, what would you have done? Would you have shouted? Would you have stepped in front of the trucks? Or would you have done what I did, which was nothing at all that night, and let the paper do the talking later? I want to take you back to the beginning, because the night the tow trucks came was not the start of it. It was step 9. I came to Pine Watch in 1987, though it was not called Pine Watch then. It was called nothing. It was a logging road, a creek, and a slope of lodgepole pine that my father-in-law Walt Brennan had bought in pieces over 20 years, with money he made running a grading outfit. Walt was a careful man. He kept every receipt, every deed, every plat map rolled in cardboard tubes in the rafters of his barn. When his daughter Marie married me, he took me out to that slope, pointed down at the flat shelf of ground near the creek, and told me it was ours someday. Marie and I built our house up the hill from it. We raised our son on that mountain. And when Walt died, the flat shelf of ground near the creek came to us by a deed recorded at the county courthouse in the spring of 1991. That flat shelf is the lot. 2 1/10 acres, gravel base. Good drainage because I graded it myself, sitting directly across the road from the white clapboard church that has stood there since before the highway was paved. For 30 years, that lot was where the church parked its overflow. Weddings, funerals, Easter, Christmas. Walt let them use it for free, and Marie and I kept on letting them use it for free after him, because that is what you do for neighbors, and because Marie loved the sound of the choir carrying up the hill on a cold night. I never put up a sign. I never charged a dime. I mowed the weeds at the edges, and I kept the deed in the drawer, and I never once thought I would need it. Marie passed 4 years ago in the fall, when the aspens were turning. After that, the house got quiet. My son lives in Denver now with his wife and my granddaughter, Casey. And they come up most weekends and the whole of the holidays. Casey is 15. She is the kind of kid who notices things, who reads the fine print, who once corrected a museum placard and made the docent go check. She keeps me honest. She is half the reason this story ends the way it does. The subdivision came in 2015. A developer named Royce Adler bought the old Hargrove Ranch on the upslope side of the creek, platted it into 48 lots, and called it Pine Watch Ridge. He built a clubhouse, a gate, a set of covenants thick as a phone book, and a homeowners association to enforce them. His wife, Sloan Adler, became the association president the year the gate went up, and she has held the seat ever since. 9 years, by the time of the Christmas I am telling you about, 9 years of golf cart patrols and pastel violation notices and a tone of voice that treated the whole mountain as her front lawn. Here is the thing she got wrong, and it is the whole story in one sentence. The subdivision boundary, the line Royce platted in 2015, ran along the upslope edge of the creek. My lot is on the downslope side. It was never inside Pine Watch Ridge. It was never subject to the covenants. It predated the association by a quarter century. Sloan Adler looked at a 2-acre gravel flat, full of cars every Sunday, decided it ought to be hers, and over the next several years built an entire campaign on a fact she never once checked. The first contact was polite. It was a Tuesday in the spring of the first year, the kind of mountain spring where the snow is gone from the road, but still lies blue in the shade under the pines. I was out at the fence line with a pair of fencing pliers and a coil of wire, re-stretching the wire the elk had walked down over the winter, when I heard the SUV before I saw it. White, big, the engine note of something that had never been off pavement until it turned onto my gravel. It had the vanity plate, the one that read pre-S1 dent, the I swapped out for a 1, and she left the engine running the whole time she talked to me, which told me everything about how long she expected the conversation to take. She got out in shoes that were wrong for gravel, suede flats the color of cream, and she picked her way across the lot the way you cross a creek on wet rocks. She had a clipboard already, that first day, though there was nothing yet to write on it. She introduced herself as Sloan Adler, president of the Pine Watch Ridge Homeowners Association, and she said the association had been receiving complaints about the unsightly parking situation directly across from the entrance to the community. I set down the pliers. I told her the lot was mine, deeded, and that the church across the road used it with my blessing, the way it had for 30 years. She smiled the way people smile when they have already decided you are wrong. A patient, closed little smile. And she looked past me at the church and the gravel like she was pricing it. She said, and I remember it word for word because I wrote it down that night, "Mr. Mercer, that parcel is functionally part of our viewshed, which makes it functionally part of our jurisdiction. We will need you to cease the parking arrangement or apply for a variance through the architectural committee. A variance through her committee. For my own land. There is a particular feeling a man gets when a stranger informs him that the ground his father-in-law graded and his wife loved is now subject to a committee. And the feeling is heat up the back of the neck, and I have learned over a long life to let that heat sit and cool before it comes out my mouth. So I did not argue. I told her no, that there would be no variance and no change, and I set it level, and I picked the pliers back up. She stood there a moment longer, waiting for the argument she had dressed for, and when it did not come, she got back in the SUV and backed up the road too fast, spitting a little gravel. That was incident 1. That night I did something I had not done in years. I took the manila folder out of the kitchen drawer, the soft worn one with Walt's handwriting still on the tab, and I checked that the deed and the recorded plat were where they should be. They were. I made 2 photocopies on the old machine in the spare room, put one set in a second folder, and I tore the top sheet off a yellow legal pad and wrote the date, the time, the plate number, and exactly what she had said, the word functionally underlined once. Old habit from the survey years. You write down what happened while you still remember it clean, because memory bends and paper does not. I did not know yet that the legal pad would become a binder, and the binder would become 3 binders, and the 3 binders would one day sit on a county clerk's overhead projector. I only knew that a woman with a clipboard had told me my land was hers, and that I had better start keeping score. Let me tell you why the writing down mattered, because this is the part most people skip. 40 cars towed on Christmas Eve is a dramatic thing. It makes you want to yell. Yelling is air. Yelling does not survive the week. What survives is the date, the dollar figure, the name of the tow company, the photograph time stamped at 9:14 that night. I learned that. Surveying, a stake in the ground is an opinion. So every time Sloan Adler escalated, I did the boring thing. I wrote it down, I photographed it, I filed it, and I said almost nothing. The second year, the notices started. Pastel envelopes taped to the church bulletin board and to the post at the edge of my lot, citing covenant sections by number, demanding the removal of vehicles, threatening fines of $50 a day. I did not pay any of them, because you cannot fine a man under covenants his land was never bound by, and I knew it even if she did not. By the end of that year, I had 19 notices in the folder. 19. I counted them on New Year's Day and wrote the number at the top of the page. The third year, she went after the church directly. She showed up at a Sunday service, stood in the back in a magenta blazer, and afterward cornered Pastor Lewis in the vestibule to inform him that his congregation was trespassing and that the association would begin documenting license plates. Pastor Lewis is a gentleman, near 80, and he came to me afterward shaken, asking if maybe they should stop using the lot to avoid trouble. I told him to keep parking there and to send anyone with questions to me. Then I added a page to the binder, because witness intimidation, even soft churchyard intimidation, is a fact worth recording. Casey was with me that Sunday. She was 11. She asked me why the lady in pink was so mad about a parking lot. I told her some people need a thing to be in charge of. She thought about that and said, but it's not hers. Out of the mouths of children, the fourth year is when I found out why. I was at the county building filing a records request, the kind of thing I do twice a year, out of habit. The way some men change the oil on a schedule whether the truck needs it or not. While I was there, I pulled the recent plat amendments for the Pine Watch Ridge area, just to see if anything near my boundary had been touched. Something had. Royce Adler had filed a preliminary plan for a second phase of the development, 40 more lots and a small resort lodge with a restaurant and an events barn, the kind of thing that draws weekenders and wedding parties up a mountain. I stood at the counter and unrolled the plan flat under the fluorescent lights and ran my finger along it the way I have run my finger along 10,000 plats, and my finger stopped at the access road. The only feasible road into the entire second phase, given the grade of that slope, ran straight across the flat shelf of ground near the creek. Across my lot, there was no other route that did not climb a wall of rock. They did not have a way into Phase 2 without my 2 acres. I stood there a long minute with the fluorescent hum overhead and the plan curling at the edges under my hands, and the whole of the last 4 years rearranged itself in my head. That was the moment the parking complaints stopped being about parking. Sloan Adler did not want my lot tidy. She wanted my lot, period. Her husband needed it for an access road worth millions of dollars in lots and lodge revenue, and the cheapest way to acquire it was not to buy it at fair price from a man who would never sell. It was to harass the old man across the creek for years, wear him down with notices and fines and lawyers, get him to accept that the association had authority over the ground, sign a variance that admitted as much, and eventually sell cheap or sign over an easement just to make the misery stop. The clipboard was a costume. The view shed was a lie. Behind both of them was a development plan with my family's 2 acres drawn straight through the middle, and a woman willing to spend years pretending it was about aesthetics. I want to be careful here because I did not know all of that the way I am laying it out for you now, clean and certain. I knew it the way you know a thing when the pieces finally line up and click. I had the plan in front of me and the years behind me, and the two fit together. So I did what I always do. I asked the clerk for a certified copy of the preliminary plan. I wrote down the file number. I paid the small fee. And I drove home and said nothing to anyone except Casey, who was up for the weekend. I spread the copy on the kitchen table and showed her the creek and the road and our lot. And before I had finished explaining, she put her finger right on the spot where the access road crossed our gravel and said, "Grandpa, that's why." She was 12 by then. She had it before I got to the end of the sentence. I filed the certified copy in the binder, in its own sleeve, because I knew without being told that this single sheet was the why behind all of it, and that one day, someone in a public room was going to need to see exactly why a homeowners association cared so much about a church parking lot. The 5th year, the fines on paper turned into a man with a fake badge. It was a Sunday in October, the aspens gold on the upper slope, and I was bringing in firewood when Casey, up for the weekend, came in from the porch and said there was a man down at the lot taking pictures of everybody's cars. He was maybe 40, soft hands, a navy polo with a little embroidered shield on the chest, and a laminated card clipped to his pocket that read, "Compliance, Officer," in capital letters. He was walking the rows with a clipboard, photographing license plates, and telling the churchgoers as they came out that their vehicles were in violation of community standards and subject to impound if not removed. I knew every code officer in the county by their first name. I had worked beside half of them for 30 years. This man was not one of them. I walked up easy, the way you walk up on a spooked animal, and I asked him which office he was with. He said the association had retained him to document violations. I asked to see his credential, the real one, the county-issued one with the seal. He looked at me, and he looked at the laminated card on his own pocket like it might have changed, and then he closed his book and said he was finished for the day and got in a gray sedan and left. I stood in the gravel and photographed his plate as he pulled out, and I read the numbers aloud into my phone so the timestamp would carry them. That afternoon, I called the county code office and got the duty officer, a man named Reyes, and I asked him plain whether any inspection had been scheduled for the church lot or anywhere near my parcel. He checked. Nothing. No officer assigned. No complaint logged at the county level. No such person on the roster. I asked him to email me that confirmation in writing, and he did, and I printed it and laid it in the binder beside the photograph of the gray sedan and the man with the soft hands. Casey watched me do it. She asked if the man was going to get in trouble. I told her the man was nobody, a costume the association had rented, and that the trouble, when it came, would land where it belonged. Incident by my count that night. Number 26. The 6th year she involved the sheriff. She filed a complaint that the church parking constituted an illegal commercial operation on association land and asked for enforcement. A deputy came out on a gray Wednesday afternoon. His name was Tom Vance, and I had known him a little for years. His boy played ball with my son back when. He parked his cruiser by the lot and walked up to the house slow, and I could tell by the way he carried his hat that he did not want to be there. I put coffee in front of him at the kitchen table. He turned the mug a quarter turn and did not drink it, and he told me something I have never forgotten. He said, "Hank, when somebody files a complaint, we have to roll on it. Doesn't matter if it's nonsense. That's the job. I can't pick and choose." I told him I understood, and I asked him what he advised. He was quiet a moment. Then he looked at the 3 binders stacked at the end of the table, already labeled by year in Casey's neat handwriting, and something shifted in his face. "What matters," he said, "is whether there's a pattern, and whether you can show it. A judge doesn't care who yelled loudest. He cares who can put it on the table in order." He reached over and tapped the top binder with 1 finger. "Looks like you can show it. So keep doing exactly what you're doing. Build the pattern. Let it get long. And if this ever lands in front of the county in public, that's what wins it, not a shouting match in a driveway." He tipped his hat to Casey, who was doing homework at the other end of the table and pretending not to listen. And he left his coffee untouched, and he drove back down the mountain. He took no action against me, because there was no action to take. What he did was hand me the one thing I had been missing, which was the shape of the finish line. Build the pattern. Let it go public. Let the document do the work. In a room. In front of someone whose job is to read it. That winter, I added cameras. 2 of them, weatherproof, on the corners of the lot, recording to a card and uploading to a drive at my house and a second drive at my son's place in Denver. Belt and suspenders. If anything happened on that lot, it would exist in 2 places before anyone could argue about it. Casey helped me aim them. She is the one who pointed out that the better angle caught both the lot and the road, so you could see a tow truck arrive and leave with a plate visible. I told you she notices things. The 7th year was the lawsuit. The association sued me in civil court to establish an easement across my lot 4, and I am quoting the filing, "Ingress and egress necessary to the reasonable development of adjacent association-affiliated parcels." There it was in black ink. The access road, dressed up in lawyer language and notarized. I read it twice at the kitchen table, and then I called the only lawyer I knew who would tell me the truth instead of the bill. A woman named Diane Ruiz, who had handled Marie's estate. She came up the mountain on a Saturday, sat at my table with a mug of coffee gone cold beside her, and read the deed. Then the recorded plat. Then worked her way through all 3 binders, 1 page at a time, without saying anything for the better part of an hour. When she finished, she squared the binders, set her hand flat on top of them, and said, "Hank, this case is a loser for them. The deed is clean. The plat is clean. They have no standing." Then she took her hand off the binders and added the part that mattered. "But it's a loser they can afford to drag out, because their goal isn't to win. It's to make you tired. They've got a firm on retainer and you've got a fixed income. They're betting you'll settle, just to make it stop." I asked her what we did about that. She said we don't get tired. But we answer every motion. We cite the deed every time. And we let them spend their money proving the thing you already proved in 1991. She was right about the dragging. It went 18 months, motion after motion, a deposition where their lawyer asked me 40 ways whether I was certain the lot was mine, and I answered the same way 40 times, the deed, the plat, the date. I did not get tired. Tired is for people who do not have a folder. The 8th year, the year before the Christmas, the lawsuit was dismissed. The judge found, exactly as Diane predicted, that the association had no standing to claim an easement across a parcel that was never part of the association and that predated its formation by 24 years. He wrote in the order that the boundary was unambiguous on the recorded plat. Unambiguous, the deed was clean, The plat was clean. The line ran where I always said it ran. We won. And Diane took me to the diner at the bottom of the highway and bought me a slice of pie to mark it. And I thought it was over. It was not over. Losing in court did not change Sloan Adler's belief that the lot ought to be hers. It only changed her methods. And it set up the night. She made the one mistake she could not photograph her way out of. Because this time I had the cameras. And this time she crossed a line that was not about covenants at all. It was about 40 cars that did not belong to her, on land that did not belong to her, on the one night of the year when the whole mountain was watching Christmas Eve. The church does a candlelight service that runs from 7 to 9, and the lot fills by 6:30. Families from up and down the mountain, some of them 3 generations in one car, kids in the back in their good coats, thermoses of cocoa on the dash. That year there were 40 vehicles in the lot by the time the first carol started. I know it was 40 because the cameras counted them, and because the tow company's own invoice, which I would later hold in my hand at a podium, listed 40 units at $175 each. The snow had started again around 8 fat, slow flakes, and from my porch up the hill I could hear the organ, and then the voices, the old carols. Silent night lasts the way it always is, and Marie's chair was empty beside me, but the sound was the same sound she loved, carrying up the cold, dark hill. At about 10 minutes after 9, as the service was letting out and people were pulling on coats in the vestibule, 3 flatbed tow trucks came down the mountain road with their lights off until the last turn. I saw them from the porch, 3 dark shapes, and then the headlights snapping on all at once at the bottom, and I knew Sloan Adler was behind them in her white SUV. She had a clipboard and a stack of pre-printed notices in a tow company she had hired to clear the lot of what she called, on a notice I still have, unauthorized vehicles trespassing on Pine Watch Ridge Association common area. The truck started hooking cars before the families even understood what was happening. I came down the hill fast as my knees would let me. By the time I reached the road, there was a chain already cinched under the front of the minivan, and the bed was tilting, and a woman was running across the gravel with one shoe, crying because her medication was in the glove box of a car already going up on the bed. Children stood at the edge of the lot in the falling snow, not understanding, holding the little paper candles from the service, the flames out. Pastor Lewis came out in his vestments with his hands open in front of him, asking the drivers to stop. Please, it is Christmas. These are families. And Sloan Adler stood in the wash of the headlights, reading her clipboard, saying the line I opened this story with, that every vehicle was getting hooked and hauled, holidays or not. I was there. And I want you to know that the hardest thing I have ever done in my life, harder than burying Marie, was standing at the edge of that lot on Christmas Eve and not stopping it with my hands. Every cell in my body wanted to walk into those headlights and put myself between the chain and the minivan. I knew, though, the way you know a survey line is true, that if I laid one finger on a tow truck or one hand on Sloan Adler, I became the story. The angry old man, the assault charge, the thing her lawyers could use to make all of it about me instead of about her. So I did the hardest, coldest, most disciplined thing a man can do while his neighbors are being robbed in the snow. I took out my phone and I filmed. I said the date and the time out loud. I walked the row of trucks and read each company name and each plate aloud into the microphone. I let the 2 cameras on the corners do their patient work, and I added my phone as a third record from a 4th angle. Then I found Pastor Lewis, put my hand on his shoulder and told him quietly to do one thing for me. Gather names. just names and phone numbers of every family whose car was taken tonight. He looked at me like I had lost my mind, like names were a small thing against 40 cars. And then something in my face steadied him, and he went and did it. Casey, who was 14 that Christmas and had come up with her dad, found me at the edge of the gravel. Her breath was fogging, and her eyes were wet and furious. She grabbed my sleeve and asked if we were really going to just let them do this. I told her we were going to let them finish. She pulled her hand back like I had said something wrong. She did not understand it that night. She told me later, much later, that she understands it now, and that it is the calmest angry she has ever seen a person be. 40 cars, towed to a yard 19 miles down the highway. 40 families who paid, between them, just under $9,000 in tow and storage fees over the next 3 days to get their vehicles back in the week of Christmas, because Sloan Adler wanted a gravel lot that a county judge had already told her was not hers. That was step 9. And step 9, finally, was the one that crossed cleanly from petty into illegal. Because towing vehicles off private property you do not own, with no authority, no signage, and a court order from 10 months earlier telling you the land is not yours, is not a covenant dispute. It is conversion. It is, depending on how the county attorney wants to read it, theft by a sitting association president acting in her official capacity. And it was all on video, from 3 angles, time-stamped, with the tow invoices and 40 witnesses. I did not sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table with the 3 binders, and a 4th one I started at 2 in the morning, and I built the timeline clean, the way I would have built a survey report. 9 incidents. 9 years. Every date, every dollar, every notice number, the dismissed lawsuit, the preliminary plan for Phase 2 showing exactly why she wanted the lot. And now the towing, with the invoice and the footage. Diane Ruiz came over the day after Christmas, read the whole thing, set down her coffee and said, "Hank, she didn't just hand you a lawsuit. She handed you the county. This goes to the commission in public, with the footage. You don't sue her. You let the institution do it." That was the plan. Not a confrontation, a hearing. The county commission met the 2nd week of January. It was a regular public meeting, the kind with a sign-up sheet for public comment. And it happened that the Adlers were already on the agenda, because Royce Adler had a Phase 2 zoning application up for preliminary review that same night, the resort lodge and the 40 new lots and the access road. He needed the commission to look favorably on his project. He had brought his architect, his renderings on foam board, and his wife, in her best magenta blazer, sitting in the front row like the matter was settled. They did not know I had signed up to speak. I want to slow down here, because this is the part that matters. And it did not look like much from the back of the room. There was no shouting. I am not built for shouting. When my name was called, I walked to the podium with one manila folder, the original. The soft-worn one with Walt's handwriting still on the tab, the one that had lived in my kitchen drawer since 1991. I did not bring the binders. I did not bring the foam board. I brought the deed and the recorded plat and a single thumb drive in my shirt pocket, and I set the folder on the podium and opened it flat. I said, "Good evening." I said my name, and that I had surveyed roads in this county for 31 years, and that I held a parcel of record across the creek from Pine Watch Ridge, deeded to me in 1991. I said that on Christmas Eve, 40 vehicles had been towed from that parcel at the direction of the association president, and that I would like to enter 3 things into the record. The deed, recorded in 1991. The plat, recorded the same year, showing the parcel outside and below the subdivision boundary that was not drawn until 2015. And 4 minutes of footage. The chair was a woman named Eleanor Pratt, who had sat on that commission for 20 years and had, I happen to know, started her own career in the county assessor's office, reading plats for a living. She asked the clerk to put the plat up on the overhead. I had marked nothing on it. I did not need to. The clerk zoomed in on the creek line, and there it was for the whole room to see on the wall, the subdivision boundary running along the upslope edge of the creek, my parcel sitting plainly on the downslope side, with a recording date stamped in the corner, a full quarter-century before the first Pine Watch lot existed. Eleanor Pratt looked at it a long moment. She leaned forward. Then she looked at the date stamp, and then she looked at the boundary again, and she said, to no one in particular, in the flat voice of a person simply reading what is in front of her, this parcel is not in the subdivision. It never was. She did not say it like a verdict. She said it like a person reading a map out loud. That was the whole reveal. A line on a plat, and a date in the corner, and a woman behind the bench who knew exactly how to read both. The room was very quiet. Royce Adler had gone the color of the snow outside. Sloane Adler stood up because she could not help herself, and she said the third of her 3 lines, the one I had been waiting 9 years to hear her say in a room with a court reporter in it. She said, that parcel is functionally part of our community, and the association acted within its authority. Functionally, 9 years later, the same word. Eleanor Pratt let it hang there for a moment. Then she asked the clerk to play the footage. 3 flatbeds, lights off until the last turn. Children in the snow. Pastor Lewis with his hands out. 40 cars. And Sloane Adler. In the headlights, on tape, in her own voice, saying every one of them was getting hooked and hauled, holidays or not. The commission watched all 4 minutes of it without a word. When it ended, Eleanor Pratt set down her pen. Here are the 2 numbers I want you to hold side by side, because they are the whole case. In 9 years and 9 documented incidents, the amount I had ever owed the Pine Watch Ridge Association lawfully was $0. 0. The deed was clean. The plat was clean. Every fine was issued under covenants. My land was never subject to. And on one Christmas Eve, the association president had directed the unlawful towing of 40 vehicles at a cost to 40 families of just under $9,000 over a parcel a county judge had already ruled was not hers 10 months before. 0 against 9,000. A clean record against a crime on video. The room could see the gap without anyone naming it. The consequence was not mine to deliver, and that is the point. I did not ask for anything. I sat down. The county attorney, who had been in the room for the zoning agenda, asked to retain the footage and the invoices. Within the month, the commission denied the Phase 2 application on the record, citing among other things the absence of legal access, because the only feasible access ran across a parcel the applicant did not own and had been found to have no easement across. The road they needed was my lot, and my lot was never theirs. And so the resort died on the slope where they drew it. The thing Sloane Adler tried to take became the exact reason her husband lost the thing he was building. If she had left the gravel alone, the church would have kept parking there for free, and Royce might have found another grade. Instead, she towed 40 cars on Christmas, put her own voice on tape, and handed the commission a reason to read the deed. The towing itself did not go unanswered either. The county attorney brought a charge, and Sloane Adler pleaded to a reduced count of unlawful conversion, paid restitution to all 40 families, the full $9,000 and then some, and resigned the association presidency she had held for 9 years as a condition. Because it turned out a lot of them had never liked the golf cart patrols either. The association amended its covenants to state plainly that its authority ends at the recorded subdivision boundary. My lot is named in that amendment by parcel number, as outside their jurisdiction forever. They wrote my victory into their own rulebook. I did not gloat. There was nothing to say that the plat had not already said better. I shook Diane Ruiz's hand. I thanked Eleanor Pratt, and I drove home up the mountain to the house Marie and I built, with the original deed back in the manila folder on the seat beside me. The church parked in the lot again the following Easter for free, the way they had since before the gate, before the covenants, before Sloan Adler ever pinned a pastel notice to the post. I mowed the edges that spring like I always had. Casey came up the weekend after the hearing, and she walked down to the lot with me and stood at the corner where the camera is mounted, and she looked at the gravel and the creek and the white church across the road, and she said, "Grandpa, you didn't even raise your voice." I told her that was the whole trick. She is 16 now. She wants to study surveying. She says she likes that the ground does not lie if you measure it right. Marie would have loved that. Marie loved the sound of the choir carrying up the hill on a cold night, and that sound came back to our mountain because a folder sat patient in a drawer for 30 years. So, here is the lesson, and it is the reason I told you all of this. If you own a piece of ground, go to the county and pull your own deed and your own plat today, before anyone gives you a reason to. Read where the lines run. Walk 'em on the dirt. Keep the paper somewhere you can find it. When somebody with a clipboard tells you that your land is functionally theirs, do not argue with them in the driveway, because the driveway is air. Write down the date. Write down what they said. Photograph it. File it. Build the folder and let it get thick, and do not touch it in anger, because the day will come when a calm person in a public room asks to see what you have, and on that day the quiet folder beats the loud clipboard every single time. The universe is slow, but it is fair to the people who keep records. If you have ever stood at the edge of your own property and watched somebody act like they owned it, tell me about it below. I read them. And if stories about ordinary people who beat petty authority with patience and paper are the kind of thing you want more of, subscribe, because next time I am going to tell you about the retired water rights examiner whose HOA drained the pond her grandfather dug, and the one filing from 1968 that put every drop of it back. Until then, pull your deed, walk your line, and keep your folder close.